Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. In this video I thought I would be sharing with you how I like to weather my vehicles, and I'm going to use this FAMO artillery tractor to show you some desert weathering techniques. We're going to use some powder and some pigments and some wash, or rather some different sort of washes, but we'll get into the details in just a minute. Now, as you can see here, I have tested some different types of washes on the side panels and a little bit on the tires and tracks, but don't worry about that because those were mostly a failure and we're going to cover them up. Now, the only thing I've really done to this model is that I've painted it in the desert yellow from Tamiya XF59, and then I've painted the dashboard and the seats so it has a complete paint job, and that's around just about it. But let's get into the weathering of the vehicle. Now, I usually use the basic acrylic paint. This one is the burnt umber, and then I add some pigments, respective of what sort of scenario the vehicle is driving in. And also I usually mix in some other paint, like English uniform or NATO black or something like that, just to make it a little more interesting. And the next thing you do is to get a sponge like this. I think it costs $1 for a packet of 5 of these. And you get a scissor and you cut them into smaller and a bit rougher pieces. And we're going to use that to apply the paint to the rest of the model. And when you do that, you get a very, very nice rust effect. Like you can see here, you just push the sponge into the paint, and then it's quite important that you have to remove most of the paint, because if it sticks on, you get a very thick layer, and we want a very, very, very thin layer, as you can show that I'm applying here. You don't have to be very gentle when you're applying paint like this, but what you should be aware of is the amount of paint on the sponge, because as you can see, as the rust effect appears on the bonnet of this vehicle, and as you can see, if there's too much paint on it, you could end up with large blob, as I did on the right hand side of the vehicle, and I really don't want that at this point. I don't want it to weather it too heavily, but I just want these smaller pieces like this. And already it is starting to take shape, and I think it looks pretty good at this point. But this is just the first step, so I'm going to continue on this, doing this all around the vehicle, and then we will circle back to the next step. Right, that's it. We're done chipping, and as you can see, it looks pretty good. I did have some minor accidents, as you can see on the sides there, that there were a bit too much paint on the sponge, but all in all, I think I'm pretty happy. Look at the racks back here. I think they look very good, and I chipped them a bit extra because, people throwing things up and down at the racks, they were a bit harsher treated than other parts of the vehicles. But all in all, very happy with this, so we go on to the next step now. And the next step is oil and wash. So the first wash I'm going to apply is the rust wash, and this is a pretty old one, so I had to dilute it pretty heavily in white spirits, as you can see I'm doing now. And when I hoped that would help then to make it a bit more runnier, so that it would spread evenly by itself all around the vehicle. But I should have used more white spirit because it didn't dilute as much as I wanted. You can see when I zoom in here, I just wanted to do the edges and some of the parts that may be harder affected by wind and weather than the other parts. But as you can see, I should have used a bit more white spirit because it didn't run about like I'd hoped. But I still think it looks good. I just do the edges and the highlighted areas, and then I use the sponge to remove it where it was too much. And that's the next step. I'm going to continue doing this now, and then I'll come back to you when that's done. Okay, that's everything washed over, and I haven't done it too much, I think. It's quite subtle. But yeah, I ended up breaking the windscreen. That was a bit of a mistake. But I think I did the washing quite subtly. I haven't done the seats yet, as you can see. I have to do those and the floor of the vehicle. And we're going to get on with that. You can't really see it all that much in these pictures because my lighting wasn't that good, but I do think that it was very nice actually. It's subtle and it's not too heavy. Uh, but the next step we're going to continue with are the pigments. And I'm going to use two sorts of pigments, the burnt umber and the yellow ore. And I'm going to use a quite stiff brush for this bit, and I'm going to take the different sorts of powder, and I've already mixed them together, and I'm going to apply the pigments all over the vehicle, quite heavy on the tracks and the running gear and the tires and things like that, but also on the seats, on the floor, and some of the larger panels like on the front and on the rear there, especially on the hinges where you would collect a lot of dust and grime. Um, and already you can see it starts to look a lot better. The tracks, uh, I think they were improved a lot with these pigments. So let's cue the music again and see how it goes. And there we are, everyone. That's the finished product. I think this was very successful. Actually, I don't think I've ever weathered a vehicle quite as good as this one. I did take my time with it, but I think it looks very nice. You can see the tracks; they look dirty and grimy, and the seats look worn that have been sitting, and the rack on the back. You can see all the paint's been chipped off. Yeah, this is probably the best vehicle I ever weathered. And you can see here in the instrument panel, I did some light weathering on that as well with pigments, and I think that turned out very well. And also here on the front, you can see, especially on the bumper there on the left, it's it's taken some punishment, and it's most of the paint's gone. And in the grille, you can see a lot of dust in there. And here on the rear as well, uh, yeah, the rack on the top. I'm very pleased with that. I think it looks natural. The tires and the tracks, happy with those. And yeah, all in all, I have to say this project turned out pretty good, and I hope you'll agree. I hope you liked it. I am, of course, an amateur in model kits, but I hope I can at least show you that you don't have to be an expert to pull these things off. As I showed you, these techniques that I'm using, they're not difficult. You just need a sponge, a little bit of paint, and some powder, and you're off. And that's the point of this YouTube channel. I want to show you how you can accomplish things with very scarce resources. Hope you liked this video. I hope you found it interesting. Maybe you learned something and picked up a few neat tricks. Please give me a like if you did. Consider subscribing. I would be very grateful if you do that. And hopefully I'll see you again in another video. Take care, and I'll talk to you later.